The charge port, you're mentioning that to me.
Yeah. So again, if the car's unlocked, you can open it quite easily, or again from the app, if we open up the charge port here.
So where are we? There it is.
Yeah, so, and basically it's what's called a CCS port, a type 2, which is the top plug, and then a fast DC plug. These are sometimes called Manneka's sockets, and they're very standard now across Australia. So every charger you go to pretty much has a type 2 plug now. The older, smaller type 1s are pretty much disappearing, but the type 2s are everywhere. The bottom 2 pins are actually for DC fast charging. So when I go to a Tesla supercharger, or in Queensland, there's a Queensland Electric Superhighway right up through to Cairns, it plugs in to both ports but charges through the DC port. And, you know, like charging this up at a Tesla supercharger, the longest is probably about 40 minutes, you know, from maybe 20% to full. So it charges relatively quickly. It's still obviously longer than a petrol car though.
So pretty, still, you have a bit of a break before you continue on, I guess.
Well, that's the way. We drove to Townsville at Christmas time, and then last week to Bundaberg. I went to Tamworth a couple of weeks ago, and I find that after about 2 hours, I need to stop either to go to the loo or just to walk around. And if you plan it, and the car can plan it, or there's apps to plan it, just stop, plug the car in, go and have a cup of tea, come back, car's charged, ready to go on to the next step.
So it sounds like you've made a few longer trips.
Yep.
I think that's a concern for a lot of people in Australia, given the fast distances people need to cover. So you've always been able to find chargers to make these trips?
Yeah. So there's a number of apps around for electric vehicle owners. One called a Better Route Planner, which is really useful to go on long drives, and it shows you where a lot of the charging stations are. But it also plans out your route as well. So it'll say you can stop here for 20 minutes, stop there for 10. With an electric vehicle, you don't drive it from full to empty. You basically drive it to your next charger, or maybe the one after that. But if you charge when you get the opportunity, you're only charging for 10 to 20 minutes each time, and it's a lot quicker that way.
So would there ever be a scenario, I guess, where you'd be caught out with a flat battery, and what would you do?
Yeah, so I think it's a bit like a car, a petrol, what we call an ICE vehicle, an internally combusted engine vehicle. Do you run out of petrol like that? You know, it's very rare that you run out of petrol. So you tend to look for, where's there going to be a petrol station? Well, here it's, where's the next charger going to be? The other thing on long drives is the car tells you how it's going, and there's a really useful display on there that says, okay, this is where you're starting, this is where you plan to get to, and this is how you're going with your charge. And it shows you your consumption. So if you get a headwind, if you get a lot of rain, if it's really hot and you're using the AC, it'll show you that maybe you're going a bit too hard and you might need to back off a bit on your acceleration or your speed. So consumption in one of these is about speed. It's about how you drive it. It's about all of the accessories you have on. So the less of those you have on, or the less fast you drive, the more efficient you'll be.
Tony, so it sounds like you've been pretty happy with the availability of ports and chargers.
Yep.
On your trips. How about in the home? How do people charge their cars?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The way I've set it up at home is we've got solar panels on the roof. They're only 3.5 kilowatts. We've had them for a while, and we have a high performance wall charger on the house, and I plug in through there. That gives us between 25 and 32 amps, just depending on how you switch it. You do have to be cautious though, because we got ours installed by an electrician, and the total demand on your house becomes important. So if you have a big air conditioner like we do, and a big hot water system like we do, ovens and so on, you can actually exceed the line current coming in, and so you need a professional electrician to install them. I get 25 amps regularly on mine, and that takes about 8 hours to charge the car fully.
And that setup, the costs involved initially. Does Tesla cover any of that, or are you sort of out of pocket?
So they supplied the wall charger. They don't do that anymore because not many people, not everybody needs a high performance wall charger. Maybe they'll just plug in, the Tesla comes with a slow charger, which you can plug in through a normal 12 amp or 15 amp socket, and it will charge the car at a slower speed, but it'll still charge it adequately.
Okay. Would it do it overnight? Is that
Yes.
Is that the theory? Okay.
Yeah. But it's a much slower prospect, and so using that, if you just plugged into a normal 240 volt charger, you'd get about 10 kilometres an hour of charge, and so the car has about 500 kilometres of range. So totally charging it up from empty would be about 50 hours.
Okay, well that's longer than I thought.
Yeah.
Whereas the fast charger, how long does that take?
It's about 8 hours.
8 hours overnight. Yeah. Okay. All right, let's talk performance. So I'm very interested to know how these things go. I've driven a Model S, and it blew my mind really about how smooth, quiet, and fast it was. How does the Model 3 compare for you?
It's such a transformation compared to previous cars I've driven. I was lucky a few years ago that a friend of mine lent me his Porsche Boxster for a few months to drive while he was overseas. He wanted somebody just to keep it going and turn it over and so on. And that taught me what it's not like to drive a nice car. One of my favourite drives is just near here, up over Mount Mee. It's a magical windy drive, and so I'd driven the Porsche over that, and I knew what it was like to take a nice car over this. This is just as good. Different, but just as good. The Porsche is very quick and very light. This is 1.8 tonnes because of the weight of the battery. So you feel the weight, but the acceleration of this car is unbelievable, and it's always there. So when you're driving on mountain roads, punching out of a corner is where you really get the exhilaration, and you can throw this car around really well as well.
So the batteries, where do they sit? Are they in the sort of in the middle there somewhere?
No, the battery's
front or the back?
right under the floor. So under the whole floor, from just behind the front wheel arch to just in front of the back wheel arch.
Okay, so there's like a layer of batteries underneath you.
There's 2,600 and something batteries sitting under there. They're all about the size of between a C and a D cell. They're a bit bigger and a bit taller, but those cells are all laid flat, and they're laid in an undulating pattern through the cooling network. So basically the batteries and the cooling system are all one unit, if you like.
There you go. So I guess in terms of longevity, is that something that they ever need to service, or is the idea that it's sealed up and you forget about it for a period of time?
So I think on these cars, the batteries are warranted for 8 years or 500,000 kilometres. But there's people that have driven 2 million kilometres in Model 3s now. There's a guy in Norway who's driven his car forever, and he's had 2 battery packs in his 2 million years, so 2 million kilometres.
So they can swap them out?
Yeah, originally the intent was you could just drop the batteries out of the car and you would be able to drive into a service station and swap battery packs in about 5 minutes. That hasn't come to be because of all the charging stations and the convenience of charging.
Tony, I want to talk about range. I think this would be one of the biggest questions people have. What sort of range can you expect on average? You know, it's very, very different to a petrol car, I guess, where we're talking litres per 100 in terms of economy. How far can you get on a charge?
Yeah, so from 100 to 0 is probably about 500 kilometres. So it's interesting, there's a lot of debate around the ranges that are quoted, because if you go on their website, they say 620 k's for one of these. That's an EPA stated range, which in Australia and in the US they have to use. It's much less than that in real life. You know, if you drove the car at 60 kilometres an hour, you could go probably even further than 600 kilometres. But that's not how you drive normally. And it's just like fuel consumption on a petrol vehicle.
Oh, they're always overstating those as well, aren't they? So that's no different there. So talk me through, say we've got a 1,000 kilometre trip up north to near Townsville somewhere. What are the costs likely to be? Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, so I drove this car to Townsville at Christmas time, and all up it was, I think driving there cost me $25. And in Queensland, there is a few Tesla superchargers. I think there's four or five now but they're mostly in southeast Queensland. When you buy a Tesla, if you know somebody who's already got one, you can get a referral code, and that gives you 1,500 kilometres of free supercharging. And I had that to start with because an Uber driver who took me home one day had a Tesla Model S, and so I used his referral charge, so we both got our 1,500 Ks. Recently, a friend of mine bought one, and I got 1,500 Ks from referring them. And when we were driving home at Christmas, I used the supercharger at Gympie, topped up there, but then I was on what's called the Queensland Electric Superhighway. That's a network of chargers all the way up the coast to Cairns, and there's, I think, a couple going out west as well. Each time I charged there was about $8, and I'd charge every 200 to 300 kilometres on the way up, mostly because that's as far as I wanted to drive before I wanted to brake, not because I had to.
So a full charge to get you that 500 kilometres or thereabouts, how much does that cost?
So if I was charging at home on a mix of solar and line power, I reckon it'd probably cost me about $8 to $10 in electricity cost.
And then on the open road at a charging station?
Yeah, so if you use the Tesla ones, or there's EV high capacity or high current chargers, they're about 60 cents a kilowatt hour. This is a 75 kilowatt battery. So if you were charging from empty, you'd probably be looking at about $40 to fill the tank, if you like.
Okay. And you'd have to do that, say, twice to get up to Townsville.
Yeah.
So you're still coming well under a petrol car,
Yes,
most petrol cars, aren't you?
Yeah, and the other chargers, the Queensland Electric Superhighway chargers, they're only 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And so they're much, much cheaper, but they're slower. The EV charger on the sunny coast does 350 kilowatts, 350 kilowatts, whereas most of the ones put in with the state government and local councils, they're 50 kilowatts. You can't use 350 kilowatts to charge this car. You could probably use about 150 max. So.
And that's superhighway.
Yeah.
So does that run up and down the Australian coast?
It only in Queensland. Once you get south of here, there's Tesla superchargers pretty much all the way, as well as NMRA chargers. And we're going to drive this car to Adelaide in August, September, and we'll use the Tesla superchargers and the NMRA chargers all the way.
So it's not just the eastern seaboard, they are spreading west as well.
Yep.
So you could, in theory, get yourself across to Perth?
Yes, you can. There's just a bit of a gap at the moment on the Nullarbor where you need to stop and charge overnight because there's not the high speed chargers there. But even in 2012, when the Model S came out, people drove around Australia in them because you can charge anywhere there's a 240 volt or 415 three-phase outlet. You can charge your car on one of those.
Absolutely. So that standard charger, you can take that along with you.
Yeah.
So if you're ever stuck, you can, in theory, just use a normal power.
That's right. I've got it in the boot all the time.
Good. Have a break.